Hi, I'd like to talk about politics because I think it's really a universal subject and it's something that we all have a stake in as well. So I think it's worthwhile to discuss some political ideas really. And I'll begin with um, the controversy surrounding Donald Trump. Now, he's very much a hated figure in much of liberal America and indeed in Europe and the UK as well. He's quite he's certainly hated by the press, and I think the average person has a bad opinion of him as well. Now, I have to admit I would have voted for Hillary. Now that's despite reservations about Hillary's social the social elements of her beliefs, like there was those emails about democratizing the Catholic Church, Podesta emails, the idea of getting rid of the papal conclave and having a democratic leader of the Vatican, which is absolutely absurd. And I didn't like that side of it, but I would have still, on balance, voted for Hillary over Trump. But having said that, I don't think Trump is a bad president at all. He's done some good things. Now, certainly the Supreme Court appointment, I agreed with that. I think it was a good choice. And also, he stands up for religious rights, and I think that's very important. And he's established good relations with Russia. Now, that's despite the media's fervent efforts to try and create animosity with Russia, which I don't really understand the practicality of. Seems to be quite a self-destructive move, because they are Westerners and they should want good relations with Russia. But that's just some thoughts on that. And so, although I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump, I don't think he's a bad president at all, really. And really, I've liked every single U.S. president. I don't think. I mean, there've been some weak presidents going back through the couple of centuries, but I think the presidency is very different from being a prime minister of the UK. With the presidency, you are the head of state and you need a certain charisma, and that charisma really shines through in almost all US presidents, I think. And that's where I tend to like more or less every US president, Democrat or Republican. And in a similar way, in the UK head of state, the monarch, I always like the monarch, and I think that's important because it shows a respect for authority, really, in terms of the monarch. She's above politics. He or she is above politics, and it's just something to reverence, really, and I think that's important. And to a lesser extent with the president, because although he's head of state, he doesn't have the same sense of authority as, I mean, almost a spiritual authority as the monarch. So that's just some thoughts on that. And British politics. Now, I've always voted Conservative in local and national elections, but I don't mind the Labour Party. I might have voted for Tony Blair in '97. I considered voting for Ed Miliband. I certainly wouldn't vote for Corbyn, but I see where his popularity comes from. And Theresa May, well, she's not a bad prime minister. Just some errors of judgment along the way, perhaps. But I think it's a shame what happened with the recent election. But then it might have derailed a hard Brexit, which is a good thing, because that's certainly not in the best interest of the UK. So there's advantages and disadvantages to that. But I certainly won't want to see Corbyn become Prime Minister. I think he has quite a destructive agenda. I mean, the 70s were so socially and economically destructive, and we won't want to see a return to that. Although Thatcher was the opposite extreme. Thatcher was too much of an individualist and a capitalist, and I don't agree with that either. Now, in terms of political philosophy, I'd say I'm more or less a centrist, but with the what's called in Catholic circles the preferential option for the poor. Now, that means that you support policies to help the poor through charitable efforts and through government efforts, and you really always have the poor in mind, and I think that's very important. And it's quite telling that the Conservatives are focusing on the just about managing or ordinary working family, I think, and that's really not the poor. It's probably their target voting demographic to expand their election base. So politics can always be quite cynical like that. I think it's important to help the poorest, and that's something that stems from my religious beliefs as well. So I think that's crucial, really. And just a final thought, really. Obviously, in Christianity and Catholicism, there's the idea of the Antichrist at the end of time. And basically, if you don't know much about this, the idea of the end days is that the Antichrist is phenomenally popular, and if it were possible, he would deceive even the elect, as the Bible says, and he performs wonders and miracles, and everyone loves him, basically. And I always find this to be a brilliant analogy for politics in general, and this goes back to Donald Trump as well, and Obama. Now, Obama was hailed in 2008 with a kind of messianic fervour, and that was a very bad sign for me, because it just had echoes of the Antichrist. And Obama wasn't bad, he was an average president, but very likeable, certainly very likeable. But with Trump, the idea that he's massively unpopular doesn't worry me, because what worries me is a strongly secular globalist agenda that I'm not a nationalist, but I do believe in national boundaries and the sovereign right of the state, and I think that's important. So I don't really like the globalist agenda. I don't want the United States of Europe, for example, and I think that's something that should be avoided at all cost. And so I think I've covered all my topics for this talk. So thanks again for listening.